Hello everyone, I'm Michaela Kathleen, and in this video I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. And in August I read the Shades of Magic trilogy. I read the whole trilogy straight through because my boyfriend read these a few months ago and I knew he was excited for me to read them as well. So first I'll share kind of my thoughts about the series as a whole, and then I'll get into each individual book. But overall, I rated the series kind of as a whole as just like 3.5 stars. It has an amazing concept, but overall it didn't quite come together the way I hoped. I'll say I'm kind of surprised that this series wasn't marketed as YA. I feel like it really probably could have been, and YA is super hot. That was just kind of a random, not really related to the quality of the series at all thought that I had throughout. But yeah, like I said, the series has a very cool concept. There are kind of 4 different alternate reality worlds going on, and all of them are centered on London. There is Black London that has like fallen from being overtaken by magic, and the other Londons have shut their doors to Black London. And then there's White London, which has magic but is kind of also in that process of being corrupted by magic. And then there's Red London, where there's lots of very healthy magic, I guess is how you would describe it. And then there's Grey London, which is modeled on our own real world London without any magic. And it takes place during the late 1700s, early 1800s maybe. And the history of our real world does play into it a little bit. So yeah, just a very cool concept. I was pretty excited for this series based on the concept alone. There were times when the books gave me just a hint of Shadow and Bone vibes. Also times, most especially in the second book, when I got some Harry Potter vibes. But overall, I just never got like super into the series. I was never like super hooked. I enjoyed pretty much all of the characters well enough and the concepts, but there was just something that never quite connected with me. And then I will say in the final book, there was a lot of stuff that I felt like could have wrapped up more. I would have liked to learn more about the Antari, which are these like special magicians in this series that have a stronger magic than anyone else. And there are only 3 of them in existence, so I really would have liked to learn more about all 3 of those characters' kind of origins. And I feel like we could have taken more advantage of the various Londons. So yeah, overall, just maybe the books didn't quite focus on what I wanted them to focus on enough, or utilize the parts that I found to be very cool enough. And I'll also say the first book really reads like a complete story. It easily could have been a standalone novel, and I feel like maybe the series would have honestly been better for it, because the second book felt completely like filler pretty much all the way through. And then, like I said, the third book just didn't quite wrap up the way I hoped. It was better than the second book, but still ended up feeling like if I was gonna take the time for it, I wish it had had more at the end. Also, I will say, the characters in these books, there are so many scenes where they just are losing apparently gallons of blood without dying and getting these just horrific injuries, etc., and just never die. And just like reading about people being taken over by the shadow magic and being in pain and suffering injuries making them lose gallons of blood all got a little bit repetitive. So yeah, those were kind of my overarching thoughts for the series, but getting specifically into book 1, A Darker Shade of Magic, as I said, I kind of enjoyed pretty much all of the characters. I feel like some of the character work is a lot of people's big complaints with this series. A lot of people find Kel to be boring and not have enough characterization, which I will agree he is the character that I'm the least interested in, but I think that's kind of common for main characters. I really liked Kel's connection with his brother Rye though, and I loved Rye as a character. He's a real soft boy character, which is an archetype that I fall for often. And then there's Lila, which everyone seems to really hate Lila, and I don't. And I was able to eventually, by the second book, kind of pinpoint why I kind of liked her. And I think it is that she's the character archetype of, she has such a damaged past, she's suffered so much trauma that she cannot let people get close to her emotionally, she can't connect with people, she's too scared, etc. And I realized that that is very similar to Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead. And so I was like, aha, I think I like Lila because on some level she reminds me of Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead, and he's one of my all-time favorite characters. That being said, I will admit that she's overpowered and stuff. All of the complaints that people make about her are legitimate. But yeah, I thought, like I said, the first book was such a well-contained storyline. Them trying to get the stone to Black London was a good goal for the book. And I was surprised, spoiler alert for the ending of the first book, and also kind of spoiler alert for the rest of the series from here on out in the video, but I was surprised at the end of the first book when our two villains were defeated in the very first book, which is part of why it feels like a very complete story, because all of the problems are solved. So yes, this one was a solid start. I was never obsessed with this one, but I liked it well enough. It felt like a really good contained story, and I think I would have probably rated it 4 stars if it had ended here. But as the series went on, it dragged down to that 3.5. So moving on to the second book, A Gathering of Shadows. And this is where the Harry Potter vibes came in, because kind of the whole concept for the second book is that there's going to be this wizard tournament between like the 3 main countries in Red London. Felt very 4th Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, Triwizard Tournament to me. And the 4th Harry Potter book is my least favorite Harry Potter book, controversial opinion. And much the same, the whole beginning of this book felt like filler. All of the preparation for the tournament for me was very boring. I was excited, again spoilers, I was excited to find out that Holland was alive at the beginning of the book because I predicted that at the end of the first book. I was like, if there's a sequel, Holland survived the trip to Black London. And I was right, so that was exciting. I did, for the beginning part of the book, since I was not interested in the tournament at all, I was very interested in the relationship between Kel and Rye now that their lives were tethered together. I found that very interesting. Rye got a lot more interesting. Before I just liked him on a very surface level. He's a soft boy, he's cute. And now he started to get a little more depth, and I liked him even more. And we got a new character in this book with Alucard the Pirate, which was a nice matching for Lila. They were characters that were enjoyable to read about, although they did not have my heart as much as Kel and Rye did. Rye, for me, definitely became the most interesting character in the second book. And yeah, like I said, once the tournament actually started, it was interesting. I don't love how V.E. Schwab does fight sequences, so at the same time, I still wasn't loving the tournament because that's mostly fight sequences, but it got better once the tournament started, and then it had a better, more interesting ending that didn't have to do with the tournament. And it had a good cliffhanger too. But Kel and Lila, neither of them had very good reasons for secretly entering the tournament. Rye's reasoning was the most interesting, of like wanting to prove that he wasn't a burden for Kel and that Kel shouldn't worry about him so much. But Kel and Lila both were just like, YOLO, this might ruin a bunch of shit, but we gonna enter this tournament. Which, I mean, admittedly is in character for Lila, but not so much for Kel. So yes, overall, a book that felt pretty unnecessary and didn't have anything of real significance until the final, maybe like 100 pages. So then moving on to the third book, A Conjuring of Light. This one was very long. It didn't feel unnecessary in the way that the second book did, but I do feel like it could have been shorter. And again, I just felt like I would have liked to have learned more, especially about the Antari in this final book. I wish things had wrapped up with more information. My favorite part of this third book was Holland and getting his backstory and like seeing all of the people that he has killed and seeing the ones specifically that he chose to kill, that he wasn't forced to kill by another person using magic on him. I found all that very interesting, and Holland became the most interesting character for me in this third book. But it did kind of drag, like I said, it's very long, and then the final battle was kind of meh. I never was super into the villain for this book. And then also, it weirdly, I felt like there was an opening for another book, even though this is where the series ends, with having the king show up to the Grey London bar, and like it almost seemed like the villain maybe got inside the Grey London king. Clearly probably not, since the series ended here with the third book. So I didn't really like that, because it just felt like an unnecessary question left at the end. And yeah, again, kind of enjoyable enough, but also reached the end and felt that it all could have just been the one book. So yeah, this month I focused on the Shades of Magic trilogy. Let me know down below if you have read this series and what you thought of it, and also what you've been reading this month. And now on to the quote for today's video, which today I have one from The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, and it's a little conversation between Aragon and Angela from the third book, Brazinger. So it starts with Aragon talking. For me, a question unanswered is like a thorn in my side that pains me every time I move until I can pluck it out. You have my sympathy. Why is that? Because if that is so, you must spend every waking hour in mortal agony, for life is full of unanswerable questions. Thanks for watching. Remember, words matter.